It's essentially official. For the vast majority of Path of Exile players, patch 3.24, otherwise known as Necropolis League, is dead and stowed away in the Necropolis, or coffined and in one of 20 different quad tabs. Believe it or not, Necropolis has one of the worst retention rates in the history of Path of Exile. It's almost matching Archnemesis, and it's lower than Lake of Kalandra. It's quite the system shock after the universally beloved, excellent retention, and surprisingly less game-breaking Affliction League. For me, 3.24's death is quite saddening. I'm one of the few who enjoyed Necropolis thoroughly, but I'm keen on understanding why many greatly dislike the league and why Path of Exile might not be as enjoyable to them anymore. I know many others feel the same, in both regards. Thus, in this video, we shall explore how Necropolis died, why that's sad, and what we can do about it, now and in the future. Necropolis League was filled to the brim with ideas. So many creative concepts they broke the game. Some were definitely half-baked, others were extremely powerful when matched with long-forgotten mechanics. A select few were executed well, but due to their original design intent and what was communicated to players, their reception was poor. However, all these new ideas in the game were only a part of Necropolis' death. The true killer seemed to be what happened after the League's release, not what came with its launch on March 29th, 2024. Let's rapidly list out a huge batch of these brand new ideas, then go over the timeline of 3.24's demise post-launch. Tier 17 maps and barring Uber boss access behind them. Tier 17 maps were meant to serve as a stepping stone from Tier 16s to Pinnacles to Ubers. The All Flame and the Lantern of Aramor buffing monster packs with stats and special rewards. Some were supposed to be extremely powerful, but rare. Multiple Atlas passive trees, 3 to be exact, to allow for greater endgame customization. Splitting up loot tables between normal, pinnacle bosses, and uber bosses, supposedly to encourage all bosses to be relevant. Powerful graveyard crafting so players could craft ridiculous items. And the huge Scarab rework with the desired effect of completely mixing up endgame. Some of these additions accomplished their intended changes. However, much was broken and required fixing in the days and weeks following 3.24's release. Some of it has never been fixed or touched, like many very valuable boss drops basically no longer existing for a huge chunk of the player base now. Anyway, to the fixes. 3.24.0 Hotfix 4, released on March 30th, 2024, stopped allowing the Domination Scarab of Teachings 30% increased XP buff while affected by shrines to occur when using lesser shrines, like those spawned by the Gull or a Lantern of Aramor effect. Tons of players zoomed to level 100 with this tech before others could. It was unintentional and unforeseen by grinding gear games, and smart players used it to blast to level 100 faster than ever before. It only took a day for grinding gear games to patch this out. 3.24.0b released on April 2nd, 2024. Primarily, it massively buffed graveyard crafting, all flame embers, and the League UI. It also added the ability for players to modify Tier 17 maps using Chaos Orbs, gave Tier 17's larger item rarity and quantity modifiers, and added more divination cards to Tier 17 specific drop pools. This buff will be important in a moment. On April 4th, 2024, 3.24.0b Hotfix 2 released. This was purely a nerf to the map fishing strategy pursued by many players, in which they would feed the map device maps searching for the Divine Orb, Exalted Orb, or Orb of Annulment Lantern of Aramor modifiers. Because the only factor in determining whether or not this mod appeared was sheer chance, people just tried to find these modifiers and the lucrative nameless seer ones, as all of them were incredibly valuable and worth burning through maps. Players would just drop maps into the map device, find one of these modifiers, plug in Frog or Rat All Flame Embers, and design an Atlas tree to specifically juice out as many Divine Orbs as possible, then run the map. After, they'd repeat with a huge Divine profit. Grinding Gear games triple tapped this strategy. They decreased the chance for each of the valuable orbs to drop from monsters, they greatly reduced the chance players would find these modifiers, and they lowered the number of monsters Rat and Frog All Flame Embers had. At this point, I wasn't even in red maps. I had not seen any rare mod. I just finished 40 out of 40 challenges yesterday. I still haven't seen any of the rare modifiers. They were way more common before this patch. Okay, onward. April 7th, 2024 brought 3.24.0c hotfix 2, which contained the patch note, Einhar and Huck are no longer affected by map modifiers. Well, thanks to the master snitch who I love dearly, Sir Gog, Grinding Your Games became notified of a T17 cheese strategy that allowed Einhar and Huck to obliterate tier 17 map bosses. A modifier that could roll on these maps allowed unique monsters to remove 10% of life and mana and energy shield on hit. This applied to Huck and Einhar. If this mod was on your map, along with Huck or Einhar, you could obliterate the map boss in less than a second. This allowed countless people to get their 5th map device slot, which was now locked behind clearing a T17 map. This patch, though, removed that possibility. The first huge patch arrived on April 10th, 2024, 3.24.1. Alongside a host of changes to tier 17 maps, Necropolis, and the general game, like the addition of new reward modifiers for T17s like more maps found and enhanced pack size, there was a huge change to the most absurd farming strategy in the history of Path of Exile. With it, someone was able to farm 10 mirrors in a day. Essentially, using some valuable scarabs, all flames, the Atlas tree, and T17 map goodness, players were juicing their maps to contain upwards of 20,000 monsters. 20,000. Beforehand, in Affliction, the most juicy league in PoE's history, players were juicing up to 2,000 monsters max. 2,000 monsters max. That's a 10x change league to league. Additionally, these monsters in Necropolis were dropping full stacks of valuable div cards like the Apothecary thanks to the various scarabs introduced in 3.24. These players flooded the market with super rare items and cards, driving down the cost of some of PoE's strongest items and making themselves incredibly rich. Then Grinding Your Games removed the strategy from the game. This is when the true exodus began. Players both casual and hardcore became extremely upset and vocal. The people who abused the strategy were super wealthy and outpricing everyone in the trade economy, and they had the best items too. The people who lost out, according to many, were those unable to attempt this strategy and make bank. Lots of people claimed the league economy was ruined. However, it plodded onward. 5 days after, 3.24.1 hotfix 1 hit. It fixed a bug that allowed players to super juice T17 maps with the back to basics keystone from the Atlas passive tree and somehow populate their maps with meat sacks inhabited by tormented spirits. With this, players were creating giant loot explosions and getting tons of uniques and currency. Grinding Your Games double tapped it and it vanished from the game. For a time. 3 days after that, 3.24.1 hotfix 3 arrived. It changed the imbued expedition craft to no longer change 25% of all currency in an area to logbooks, as it was allowing people to absolutely print ludicrous amounts of logbooks. They changed it to only apply to unearthed monsters. 3.24.2 was a big patch with a few minor controversial fixes on April 23rd. Mainly, it added 7 new scarab types, boldly. A little over a week later, another update hit, 3.24.2 hotfix 4. It contained this sole patch note. Rare monsters that are shaper touched from the tier 17 map modifier unintentionally had the bonuses from the rare monster pantheon modifier. This modifier no longer grants the monster increased life, item quantity, item rarity, and experience. This further nerfed farming strategies involving rare monsters, shaper touched rares, and tier 17 maps. Essentially, if you juiced your map enough, every shaper touched rare ended up being a loot pinata, even though they were pretty tough to fight. Finally, the last patch to hit was May 3rd, 2024, the infamous 3.24.2 hotfix 5. Again, it contained only one patch note. Fixed a bug which allowed the bestiary craft using the Black Morrigan recipe to not respect item socket rules. We're investigating the items that have been created through this method and are working on fixing them. Any gems socketed in these items are at risk for being destroyed when these items are fixed. Essentially, somehow people figured out they could make any item have 6 sockets, like Calm's Heart or the Squire. While it was patched quickly, the fate of the items were left up to chance. Would they be deleted? Would they not be? I'd say yes, but we still don't know. After all these wild mid-league changes and fixes, The league is now sitting around 20% of its peak player base, and more are leaving by the day. Was it the changes or the league mechanic itself? It's hard to exactly pinpoint it. We'll get into that more in another video, but this timeline was more meant to set up the next question. I'm so sad about Necropolis League. Necropolis League is dead, yes, but why is that saddening? Well, there are three facets here, and one of them relates specifically back to me. The other two are community-wide concepts. We'll end with the personal one. First, the rapid death of a league dampers the experience of everyone else still playing and affects their league experience drastically. Trades are slower or non-existent, global chat is a ghost town, and discussion here on YouTube, on Reddit, or the PoE forums dies down entirely. Highly active PoE leagues are lovely. Affliction was a standout. Plenty of people get to play longer, try more new builds, beat content they haven't before, and generally have a better time than they would otherwise. If players leave in droves from an online multiplayer game, those that remain feel it. Second, it creates an incredibly tough situation for Grinding Gear Games, the developers of PoE. Hear me out before you go in for the kill, my fellow exiles. With every PoE patch, Grinding Gear Games is obviously attempting to create the best new version of the game they can. With this particular update, they went hard. They poured a ton of effort into the game and placed in a variety of ideas and items they thought would mesh well with PoE 1 and its player base, but it fell short. For many, it fell incredibly short. That is not the intent of Grinding Gear Games in the slightest. However, it happened, and it instills dissatisfaction toward Grinding Gear Games into the minds of many. Third, and personally, it's unfortunate to see all my friends and fellow content creators dislike the game. I've seen, heard, and spoken to quite a few streamers and video makers in the PoE community, and they're quite unhappy with this league. For some, it's what the game has become, in the sense that people are measuring everything in currency made per hour. For others, it's all the updates Grinding Gear Games is making to the game to patch out wild strategies and unintended interactions. In every case though, it's quite the depressing scene. It's almost reminiscent of a breakup, wherein they sincerely used to love PoE, but they just cannot play it anymore due to a pileup of issues they see with the game. Genuinely, it's heartbreaking, and as someone who cares about these people and PoE, it affects me personally, even if I'm enjoying the game quite a bit. Okay, so now you see why I'm sad, right? Right? Now let's ask ourselves, what can be done and how can this not happen in the future? Well, this is definitely the trickiest part. There seems to be a shift ongoing at Grinding Gear Games right now, and that might mean a change for how PoE is developed alongside some growing pains. Some of the sadness and Grinding Gear Games reactions are also community driven though, so let's tackle that aspect before we talk about the developers. Fear of missing out was a huge cause of early changes, seemingly, and a strain of it seems to be a sizable chunk of why players and creators are feeling less and less invested in PoE. Lots of people compare themselves to others to the point of not being able to enjoy the game if other people are doing things they cannot reach or they cannot compete with. All the wild new strategies found out this league that were abused and subsequently nerfed exhibit this perfectly. Players abused early and often, then the unintended strategies were nerfed, fixed, or entirely removed, and a huge swath of the player population didn't get to use them. A segment of those players got upset, spread the upset, and likely left the league. It's a tricky thing to navigate. A player like me is unaffected by this. I do not play to earn divine orbs per hour. I don't make content about how to earn divine orbs per hour the fastest or anything like that. Others do. This will destroy their enjoyment of the game. My silly advice, which I know is hard to live by, is don't let others dictate your enjoyment of the game. I say that's silly because in a game like Path of Exile, wherein you quite often do measure yourself against others, this will definitely affect your enjoyment if that's the main reason you play, if that's what drew you to Path of Exile in the first place. Here's where Grinding Gear Games comes in. Will Grinding Gear Games do as they did in Necropolis League in the future? It's evident with Grinding Gear Games Live, the new leadership of Mark Roberts, and how they rolled out all the new 3.24 information, something has shifted at Grinding Gear Games. They want to make sweeping alterations to the game, and while in the past they usually didn't change fundamentals mid-league, Now they are. Is that the right thing or the wrong thing? Was this a one-time thing, or will this happen in the future? If they make huge additions and changes to the game while juggling other stuff, cough cough, Path of Exile 2, cough cough, Path of Exile 2, they won't be able to catch many of the issues beforehand alone, neither will their Alpha Realm testers. So we're left with them making smaller changes, them making giant changes and fixing issues mid-league, or them making huge changes and not fixing issues mid-league. Now, there is a fourth option, one that the Grinding Your Games competitor Blizzard does. Those are public test realms. I highly doubt this would ever happen, as there are a slew of negatives like lower league hype, people knowing what to do before the expansion comes out, and more, but it's a possibility if it avoids the situations we found ourselves in with the Necropolis League. I'm of the mindset we should move forward with giant changes and additions and only make alterations if it's affecting server stability. That's about it. The market will adjust to wild strategies, but if the strategies flooding the market are fixed after the fastest players among the PoE community use them, absolutely everything will be dictated by them and leave many others in the dust. If there's no perfect stance here, I'd say that's the one to go with to ensure the integrity of every upcoming Path of Exile league. My mind is changeable, though. Try to persuade me. So, why do you think Necropolis League died? Am I spot on in the video or totally off base? Please let me know in the comments, fellow exiles. If you'd like more League dissections such as this about Path of Exile and other ARPGs, please subscribe to the channel and like the video if you liked it. If you don't, it's possible I'll be exiled from the PoE community forever. Another set of videos I'll be continuing in good time is the PoE 1 flashback series. They're similar to this one, but mainly focus on overviewing what was added in each Path of Exile patch starting from the very beginning, Path of Exile 1's inception. Watch this awesome video on it now to learn all about how Path of Exile came to be.